I will now call the July 20th, 2022 meeting of the Farmville Planning Commission to order. Our chairman is absent for tonight's meeting on a much deserved vacation. And then we also send our good regards to fellow Commissioner Patrick Crute, who continues with his National Guard service. But welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. We will have a roll call vote.
Dr. Miller? Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Weiss? Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Davenport?
Here.
Mr. Patterson?
Here.
Mr. Crute? Perfect.
We would like to welcome tonight the newest member of the Farmville Planning Commission, Mr. Rhett Weiss, who has joined us in the Farmville area and has immediately gotten involved in a number of endeavors. And so, Rhett, just want to turn that floor over to you to say a few words if you care to.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I joined you all as a member of the public a meeting or two ago, sitting out there, because matters of planning, land use, zoning are near and dear to my heart. I am a new resident of the community, moved here, I was just saying, on December 1st. Live on 4th Avenue, very close to Lee and Jane, and apparently a lot of people. You. Maybe it's a requirement to be on the commission to live in that neighborhood. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. My background is I'm a lawyer by training. I did a lot of land use and zoning and real estate related work early in my career. I don't practice law anymore. I moved over to the business side of things. A lot of my work has been in economic development on behalf of different companies, sometimes, usually trying to support a project, sometimes voicing concerns about a project. But during my career after practicing law, I was a Google executive and also at Amazon AWS, an executive there. And early in my career, I lived in Front Royal, and my law firm represented the town of Front Royal, and so we represented the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals, the town in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I got an early taste of this set of issues, and it just fascinates me, and I'm just delighted that the town council would appoint me to join you. So let's get to it.
Well, thank you. We are excited to have you and look forward to the expertise that you will bring to this group. You are joining at a moment where we are excitingly busy with the things that we have ahead of us, so welcome. We will now ask for a motion to approve the agenda that is before you. So we'll take that at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Perfect. We will now ask for a consideration of the minutes from the June 15th, 2022 regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Those minutes were sent out as an addendum to the meeting packet that you received. So having had a chance to review those, we would ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second. It has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from June 15th. Are there any adjustments to those minutes? Being that there are no adjustments, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Any abstention? Awesome. The minutes from June 15th are approved. We will now turn to town staff to see if there is anyone that has signed up for the public participation portion of our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We have not received any prior comments to be read into the record, and no one has signed up to speak.
Perfect. Well, thank you. We will now, there is no public hearing scheduled for tonight, so we will move on to item 7 on our agenda, which is a staff update.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just have really briefly 3 things that we want to go over. Number 1, you have received the monthly department report from the director from me to the town manager. So just to kind of bring Commissioner Weiss up to speed, this is something that we always include in the Planning Commission packet, although it's really intended for the town managers and for the council's consumption and consideration. It's just an update, and all department heads do that, but the one that's going to be the most relevant to the Planning Commission is obviously the Community Development Director's report. So if you've got any questions about any of those items in there, certainly let me know. One of the things that will, onto item number 2 under staff updates, we will be re-advertising for the building official position. So if you know of anyone who is qualified or has experience in the construction trades, certainly send them our way. We'd love to talk with them. Board of Zoning Appeals was scheduled to meet last month, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, the meeting was postponed until this month. So the sign variance that was to be heard last month will actually be heard this month. It's going to be next Thursday, July 28th at 3 p.m. That concludes the staff updates. Certainly let me know if you've got any questions. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you all. Thank you for that report. I did see an item in the report under item of interest regarding the Longwood Village briefing with community and consultant stakeholders. As it relates to that, I just want to share with the group that STEPS has been leading an effort, a local nonprofit here, to partner with the Better Housing Coalition out of Richmond, Virginia, as they explore the possibilities as it relates to future use of Longwood Village. So they are calling this a conversation to reimagine Longwood Village. They are holding meetings next week here in the community, a kickoff meeting at the Moton Museum on Monday at 5:30, followed by a larger community meeting on Wednesday in the Blackwell Ballroom at Longwood University. Would definitely encourage you all to attend if you are able. I think it fits well with the aspirations that we had in our comprehensive plan as it relates to the need to explore affordable housing opportunities. So just wanted to make mention of that. So with that being said, we'll move to item 8, a status update as it relates to items ZTA 22-001 and item ZTA 22-002. Mr. Pambit.
Thanks again. This is just a really brief status update under old business, since you all have already considered these items. So the first zoning ordinance amendment, or zoning text amendment, which is what ZTA stands for, was with regards to the heights of certain architectural features, including flagpoles. The town manager has briefed the town council on, and the ordinance and the Finance and Ordinance Committee on that, and that is currently in the council's realm, if you will. So they have yet to hold a public hearing on that, and I expect that to be done within the next month or so. Same thing with the signs. ZTA 22-002 was with regards to signs. If you recall, there was a package of sign ordinance amendments. Number one, for signs in the B2 and B3 districts, which if you look in the zoning ordinance, it's actually one chart. So the same regulations apply to both zoning districts. And that was just in response to, again, various sign variances that we have been receiving. And throughout, the staff has always been of the mind that a business can continue, so there's no taking if a sign variance has been denied. So what we're doing is we're actually adjusting the sign regulations to allow bigger signs while still trying to accomplish the community and small town placemaking goals that are laid out in the comprehensive plan. The other part of that zoning text amendment was also the size and the timing of political and campaign signs. So what the Planning Commission had asked for last month was to move forward with the B2 and B3 regulations, but to hold that back. So that the town council is also considering that. So hopefully that will come back to the Planning Commission for some additional consideration. But honestly, what I heard last month and throughout is it's not necessarily the front end of a campaign, it's what happens after the campaign. How long does somebody have to take the signs down after an election? And I think that's a valid question. So again, that zoning text amendment collectively with the B2, B3, and the political signs is also in the council's realm at this time, and they will need to hold a public hearing. So that's it with regards to the status of what you all had previously done, all your work last month.
Cool. I think appreciate those updates. I think it's great to kind of see where the progress is continuing with the items we can consider. Any questions for Mr. Pambit related to old business?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Pambit.
Yes, sir.
Tying two points together, would the BZA matter, this sign variance matter, need a variance if these new regulations were in place? In other words, would the new regulations make that variance request moot?
You mean the one that's being heard next week?
Yes.
The variance would still need to be would still need to be heard. Let's say, for example, the town council ultimately amends the ordinance per the staff's and the planning commission's recommendation to increase sign sizes, the number of signs, that kind of thing. What we have proposed is essentially a 2 square feet per linear foot of store frontage or street frontage, depending on a certain situation. They would still need to come in for a variance because their sign would still exceed that 2 square feet per linear foot of store frontage. It's just that the variance would need to be smaller, because right now they're asking for a significant, variance from what's currently required. I don't have those figures in front of me. I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you, but being that as it's a sign, they could still have a furniture store. It's just that they still need to reduce the size of their sign even after this hypothetical, amendment, or this potential amendment. So I wouldn't say that for this variance for next week, would this ordinance amendment make that moot? No, they would still need a variance. There are certain requests that the Board of Zoning Appeals has heard in the past that this amendment would help. But to say 2 square feet per linear foot in a transitional business district, which is B2, or a highway commercial district, which is B3, is actually standard. You'll see that ratio all over Virginia. So I don't think that we're requiring anything less in that case, after we change the ordinance, than say what a South Boston or a South Hill or some of these other smaller towns that are comparable, that might also have the same placemaking goals. Because I always want to bring it back to the placemaking goals. We have to balance what the businesses want with what the community also wants. And I think that 2 square feet per linear foot does that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on old business? Cool. We will move into new business. First, a discussion of upcoming amendments.
Thank you, sir. The amendment that I wanted to concentrate on tonight is the Moton Museum Gateway Overlay Update. Now, when we started talking about the Planning Commission workload back in the spring, the staff had proposed certain amendments throughout the summer on into the fall. And what I would consider to be the highlight of this next round. So the first round were your signs and your height regulations, which you've already considered. The next round would be basically this one, the Moton Museum Gateway Overlay Update. I will talk a little bit about what I thought we could do as well. I know I had mentioned setbacks in the past, but in discussing with the town manager and with Cam earlier this week, there isn't a pressing need like there is for the Moton Museum to go fiddling around with the setback bulk regulations and definitions and things like that. So to kind of casually put it, we want to take our foot off the pedal when it comes to the setbacks, but we want to go full steam ahead with Moton Museum. So what we're going to do tonight is just talk at a very high level about the Moton Museum Gateway Overlay. Now, when I got here in December of 2021, within a month or so, I was briefed on the Moton Museum Gateway Overlay, or rather the Moton Museum application to the World Heritage Initiative to get World Heritage designation. And part of that is to have an overlay district. Now, for people who are not aware of what an overlay district is, it's essentially another zoning district that's placed on top of the existing or underlying zoning. So your property may be zoned whatever, R1, B2, whatever, and then there is another layer of zoning regulations that are, intended to accomplish a variety of things. Usually it's protection. I had provided you some examples in your memo. Airport safety, historical considerations, environmental considerations. We have a floodplain overlay in the zoning ordinance, and that's going to be standard in Virginia as in most places throughout the country. But those are just some examples of overlays. And as part of the World Heritage program, a buffer or an overlay district is one of the boxes that has to be checked in order to achieve that designation. Now, Cam will tell you that the designation is not a foregone conclusion just because you have this, but this is just one of the things that we have to work on in order to help that process along. So getting back to the timeline, I was made fully aware of it, in that late January, early February timeframe. And since then, the staff has kind of been working behind the scenes to get to the point where we can offer you as the Planning Commission, the community, property owners, town council, any other stakeholders, some language, some district boundaries. One of the other considerations that the staff has been trying to figure out, and we think that we've got a pretty good handle on that, is what type of review and decision is going to be proposed. So is this something that we need to stand up a a historic commission or an architectural review board or something like that. And the consensus on staff is that is not something that we want to try to do, is to try to pull in another board or commission to review development in that overlay district. So there are several examples of this being done administratively by the staff and the chief administrative officer, in this case, town manager, zoning administrator, what have you. So that's the direction that the staff is going, is to not try to increase resource requirements by standing up another, architectural review board or something like that, and try to do that with what we've got. So what are the next steps? Well, first of all, before I talk about next steps, let me talk about the district boundaries. So in your packet, I had provided you all with a map of what the proposed district boundaries are. And you'll see in the legend, this area in blue is the Georgia State University recommendation. And Georgia State University is one of the quote-unquote agencies that we're working with on this World Heritage designation. And what we on staff like about these boundaries is that they're compact and they don't impact a lot of homeowners. And it still protects the immediate and adjacent properties to the museum. So I think that there's a good balance of protection and compactness there. So with that being said, I just want to take a pause and see if there are any questions just generally about overlays. Take a pause and ask if there are any questions about the World Heritage process, anything up to this point. And I don't know if you want to jump in, Mr. Vice Chair, but this is right up your alley.
So just a further update as it relates to the effort that we are undertaking. So we are coordinating with 12 civil rights sites from across the South to make a joint serial nomination for this designation. World Heritage status is the highest form of historic designation that a historic site or cultural site can receive. It is administered by a group called UNESCO. And so, there are certainly steps to be able to get to the point where you receive that full consideration. And so Georgia State is the group of historic preservation professionals that have been tasked with leading this initiative to move this nomination forward. And so all of the communities involved in this initiative are going through similar conversations as it relates to buffer zone protections. We know that the museum site itself is protected with an easement and with the National Historic Landmark designation that the site has. But the buffer zone protections provide additional support in helping to protect the integrity of the environment that surrounds the museum property. So that is the effort that is being undertaken here. I think in addition to the attachment that you see as it relates to the overlay district, I think there's some historical significance in terms of some of the properties that are a part of this that tie into the interpretive story that the museum provides and shares, but in agreement with the town manager that the goal here was to keep it compact and ensure that we are only kind of including what is needed to offer the best buffer protection as we move forward. There is a commitment for the university-related properties to be supportive of this World Heritage effort. You know, quite a few of the pieces of property are tied to the university, in addition to the effort that's being undertaken here.
So, real quick, the last thing that you just said with the university or the state property in the area, they've already indicated they would be supportive of the overlay, and they have an idea of what the overlay terminology and things like that would be.
Yep, so they have an idea of what that would look like. You know, certainly those pieces of property would not technically fall in the, under the guidelines of the overlay. So they would need to offer additional verification of their support as we kind of put this forward.
Yeah, I was gonna look at this closer and I didn't. The ball fields and well, pretty much all the ball fields in the area, I'm assuming some of that is private in the area as well, as far as I remember. But those are the areas you're speaking about in particular, the ball fields, that's university's property, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I will mention that as a state agency, the university is exempt from the zoning ordinance, from the local zoning ordinance. So one of Georgia State University's recommendations is a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, between the, between the university or the Commonwealth and the town of Farmville, that they will, abide by, the stipulations in the regulations, whatever those end up being. So again, the overall notion, and I'm about to throw in a big word here, sovereign immunity, that the Commonwealth has, and that the university as a as an agency of that, again, not subject to local ordinance, but I've seen every indication that the university would want to see this go through, and I think that as Georgia State University sees that MOU, whatever form that takes in the future, would make that a better, we would essentially score points for having that MOU in place, because a large amount of the district, you can see, is state property.
Yeah.
I'd say, I'm just guessing, it's probably about maybe a third.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification. I was under the same understanding, and I thought there would probably be some type of steps or process in place to have an agreement, especially a documented agreement, especially if this is basically being recommended by the, Georgia State. The town is moving forward with some of it, but there's a certain piece of it that you can put an overlay on it. It is what it is. So, yeah, that's good. Thanks for clarifying that and bringing it up and pointing it out.
Yeah, I have a question. So was there any discussion at all about bringing this over, all the way over to Hill Street and Irving? I noticed that little jog, and I realize you're trying to keep, not impact residents as much as possible, but I don't know, that just seemed like it would make sense.
Actually, it's interesting that you should bring that up, because the original Georgia State recommendation was to bring the line straight down Hill Street all the way to Irving, and then it would take an easterly to include that little chunk that you have so astutely noticed that it's missing. But when I talked with Ann Pharisee, kind of explaining the staff's perspective on a couple of different things, number one, first and foremost, does it make sense to bring a district boundary, whether that's an election ward, a precinct, a zoning district, overlay district, whatever, straight down a street, and have only one side of the street be subject to it and not the other one, and not the other side? Point number two, and this was really more for our local experts, and I kind of relied heavily on CAM's expertise or knowledge of the neighborhood. We want to protect primarily what's within visual eyesight, sight lines, or was there anything on Hill Street that was directly relevant from a cultural, historical standpoint? And the three of us, between, you know, Moton Museum and the town staff and the Georgia State staff, was, if the answer is no, then why include it? So that's why you see in the legend Georgia State recommendation, quote unquote, revised, because their original proposal was to do exactly what you said, was to bring it straight down Hill Street to Irving and then just include all that as well. But if there's nothing in there that's really relevant, then it should be excluded.
And I think there could have been at some point, but when you look currently, is there? So.
Right, that was my question, just historically, I mean, Hill Street, that neighborhood or that community would, I would think would tie in nicely with Moton, with the overlay.
Yeah, you know, so the way I was looking at it, and it was in terms of structures that are currently in place. I think certainly over the course of history, Hill Street certainly has an impact in terms of the story that the museum shares. But I was just more thinking of present day structures that currently reside, and then also, you know, thinking of what presents the best opportunity for this to move forward. But I think all of that, I mean, in my mind, I mean, I think all of that is up for consideration by the commission and then council.
Also note that it says draft, so if we want to amend the boundaries, you certainly can. There's a version of this district in the comprehensive plan, which in the staff's opinion, it was a non-starter because it didn't really protect anything north of the site, and it was all really geared towards the backside, towards the east side. So you see where Parkview Drive kind of wraps around and turns into Andrew, and you see where South Main actually runs off the map as you head south, and then Andrews to a point where the Truist Bank is. It would be nice to protect approaches to the museum, but there is a reality that when you include more properties, there's a potential for more opposition. And then also, is that part culturally or historically significant? Is that really attached to the museum itself? So and then the staff had also submitted came up with a version. It was bigger than the Georgia State recommendation, but I think that in discussing it again with Cam, with the town manager, and with a couple of other folks, it's like compact is probably better to give it the best chance of approval and not be too extensive with the boundary or with the district.
That makes sense.
I have a few questions, if I may. Two process questions and then one about boundaries. The first process question is, will UNESCO be looking at these boundaries in the overall package, just even informally before it's all submitted, just to get some input, some feedback that, yeah, this seems to be workable? That's if you know, that's one question, versus this is what everybody locally came up with, or Georgia State came up with, here you go, what do you think? Is there, basically to eliminate surprises with UNESCO. So I'll do this one question at a time. That's question one.
I think what I would say to that, I think certainly there is a team of advisors that are well-versed in processes such as this going before UNESCO for consideration that will be involved, that, you know, we could turn to give some thought. You know, from UNESCO overall, I mean, the review process, once it gets to that point for full consideration, just based on the amount of folks involved in the review process, you know, it's kind of tough to, you know, they've got some subjectivity in terms of how they interpret. But I think the advisors involved in the process with the Georgia State team is the best group that will be able to provide some thought and insight.
Thank you.
And so that advising team, you know, includes staff members that are a part of the Georgia State effort. It includes representatives from the sites that are involved in the World Heritage process. It includes representatives from the state historical resources departments of the states that are represented in the process. So some good feedback on that front.
Gotcha. And then the related process question is, I presume, since this is, you know, basically a zoning ordinance change, this eventually will be part of a public hearing, and the public, whether they're a landowner in that overlay district or not, the public would have an opportunity to express its views.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that public hearing process at the planning commission level, and then should it go to council for recommendation, I mean, for full approval, then they'd have their own set of public hearings. You know, we also think it's important that, you know, we do some additional community meetings and outreach that are open to the public on top of what might be required from a public hearing standpoint, just to get this out there as much as possible before it's considered.
Super. And then my boundary question is, what was the thinking behind the northern boundary cutting right through a parking lot instead of at one end or the other of it? And, you know, and it looks like, you know, basically just north of the ball field, but it's like cutting through part of what's north of the ball field and part of the parking lot instead of one end or the other.
My educated guess is that it was just an extension of the line that's created by Irving Street.
By Irving, yeah.
Right. So if we were to go by parcel boundaries, then, you know, that line might actually go up, what is that?
Where Wynn is.
Race Street, Wynn, you know, of those areas.
Right.
And honestly, you know, it's all state property. I think that we would probably engage a university conversation about, well, would it not make more sense to, you know, to use the streets in this case as a boundary so that it's easily followed, easily demarcated.
Right.
Yeah. I guess that if one was to survey a line straight from the intersection of Irving and Griffin and just go in an easterly direction, then that could also be fairly simple, but there is no relation to anything on the ground, so I certainly understand the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing on the ground to follow.
I can see the line is just an extension of Irving, but it also, practically speaking, seems to be an odd result because it's right in the middle of that parking lot in the surrounding area.
And I wondered if there was any conversation with Longwood in terms of their master plan and what their future plan is for these areas, because I know a few years ago they were talking about eventually moving the ball fields from away from there and having them down over by the river somewhere. I don't know if they're still considering that, but
So the current master plan that is in place calls for that set of space to always be an athletic field of some sort. You know, it just might not be the fields that are currently there. So, you know, I think it would still fit within in the overlay standards that would be put in place. But that is a good question, and you know, I'm not sure, you know,
Well, and we know the master plan can change it
Yeah.
with a new president or whatever, so.
So, to kind of follow up on Rhett's questions about process, we want to talk about next steps. So, again, as I had mentioned, the staff has been working behind the scenes on reviewing various documents that were suggested by Georgia State to look at, policies and ordinances from some of these other cities that are involved in this process, and then some that aren't actually involved, but they're just examples of historic districts. Now, I just want to make one thing clear: this is not a historic district. This is a gateway overlay. So. It's really intended to enhance and to protect what's there, and then to enhance any future development. Make sure that that's kind of built to a higher standard so that we can kind of, as much as I love Burger King, we probably could have asked for better if we had known that this was going to be, But next steps over the next few weeks. It'll be contingent on the staff to continue working on the language and to finish its first draft of the language. We certainly want to present that to all the stakeholders. Georgia State University, the person that we're working with at Georgia State University is Ann Pharisee, and of course the town staff. So as we look at how realistic a level of regulation we're talking about, we're obviously going to be involving the Planning Commission and the Town Council in those discussions. So the next few weeks, I would say the next 4 to 6 weeks is really going to be finishing the language, getting it out there, scheduling and holding public engagement as Cam had mentioned. And at that time, once we're fairly certain about the district boundaries, then we can start, sending out mailers and that kind of thing, and perhaps having a meeting at the museum to have a conversation about, and getting some additional input that way. And of course, later on in the fall, the required public hearings that you're talking about. So naturally, because it is an ordinance amendment, as Rhett had said, Planning Commission will need to hold a public hearing, and then eventually the council will need to hold a public hearing. So this is being, I guess, phased in a deliberate manner, because we do want to be deliberate in this is really the first type of, the first district of its type here in Farmville. We're talking about an overlay that potentially entails some architectural and design standards, land use standards above and beyond what's already in the zoning ordinance. And we do want to be, we want to make sure that everyone's on the same sheet of music as we move forward with that. So again, deliberate and communicative in making sure that the public and you all and the Georgia State folks and the the UNESCO folks, if need be, are all included. So with that being said, that concludes the staff's remarks on what's happening with the Moton Museum Gateway. This is really more of just kind of a high-level discussion, high-level information. Later on in the meeting, when we talk about next meetings and that kind of thing, staff will recommend that you meet in August, in which point we'll bring you more specific language, and then we can have more more discussion about what's being required in terms of architectural standards, or maybe you guys really do want to stand up an architectural review board. This is not going to be staff's recommendation, by the way, but if you really get into it and decide you just want to head off in that direction, that's a discussion you could have at that point. But I would advise against it even at this stage. So again, that concludes the staff remarks. Certainly available for any other questions at this time.
One more question, if I can, just at a high level, to the extent that folks are aware what's going on with this, any concerns mentioned yet? Any objections, like from any of the property owners who would be within the overlay?
We haven't gotten to that point in terms of pulling property owner lists together and everything. You know, what the staff had spent essentially the last 3 to 4 weeks doing is just mapping out certain districts to see what kind of makes sense. The staff's version had actually taken into consideration approaches. So when you're talking about approaches to the museum site itself along South Main Street from the north and the south, along, I think that's Barrow. Let me go back here. Yeah, Barrow Street. Did we want to go all the way down to Davidson? Did we want to include Hill Street, the east line of Hill Street? How far down did we want to go south to South Main Street? Where are some logical termini for these approaches? You know, like it says it in the title of the district itself, gateway overlay. So are we looking at gateways heading into the museum site, or are we using the site itself as a gateway? Depending on the parameters of how you draw your map, it could greatly change your district boundaries. So what we're looking at now with the blue outline is just a compact area that really encompasses the properties that are directly adjacent and nothing more. To the northeast, you've got the Mary Branch School directly across South Main Street. To the east is also the Oddfellows Cemetery. So there are some other sites that are being included in that. Interestingly enough, the comprehensive plan recommendation really didn't get into it that much, so we didn't, quite honestly, find that very useful. So that's why we've gone with the Georgia State recommendation here. The staff recommendation includes a significantly higher number of private residences, which we did not feel like would be advisable at this time. Again, we want to keep it compact and not impact a greater number of properties than we really need to, and still accomplish the purposes of the district, which again is to protect the site and the immediate environs.
Perfect. So thank you for that update. Does this include the Chapter 29 updates?
We could discuss that under new business. Well, actually, let me go back. So when we're talking about the ordinance amendments, and in the agenda, it actually says new business, upcoming amendments, Moton Museum Gateway Overlay District, and then B, other Chapter 29 amendments. That's the setback thing that I was mentioning before.
Perfect.
We're taking our foot off of the gas pedal when it comes to the setbacks. We don't have any pressing or urgent situations that we were trying to address. Those were just some things that we could see that we might need clarification in the future, but it's not a problem now, so so the staff is not going to try to address that at this time. We want to focus squarely on the Moton Museum and try to get that done before the end of the year.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I have no other remarks under item B, other Chapter 29.
So item B and C under new business.
Staff doesn't have anything new to offer under item B, staff items, so I'm just going to turn that over to the commission if there's anything else it wants to.
We will open it up to the commissioners if you have any items that you'd like to bring forth for comment at this time.
I'll just say that I think it's great what's going on with the Moton Museum. Studying understanding what's been going on there over the last 4 or 5 years. Your involvement there has gotten my interest a little bit piqued in what's going on there, and I think it's really a really great thing for our community to do. And probably, I think Mr. Pammett had mentioned it earlier, one of the first of its kind of something with architectural draw in that area. And I think the right approach, at least what I've heard is being said and spoken about with staff, to try and limit this to start with. The overregulation, I mean, I'm not a fan of it, and I don't think a lot of our community is. But at the same time, if it can be pointed in one area, a great thing happens from that if it's done the right way, that the surrounding areas naturally develop that way. So I think the approach is right, and I'm excited about what you guys are discussing, and excited for the Moton Museum, and hope that we can help get this where it is, or where it's headed. So, yeah, it's an exciting thing and really good for the community. So,
Any other comment?
I will just mention that the regulatory piece that we're discussing is just one part of a larger puzzle when it comes to the Moton Museum and when it comes to the community in general, because what we're talking about here is hopefully achieving a designation that is actually pretty rare. We're talking about World Heritage designation here, and that's got tourism implications. That's got, besides just the money aspect of it, we're talking about economic development, quality of life, tourism, those kinds of things. But at the very heart of all of this was a very important historical event. And as much protection as we can get for that, and we can continue to kind of pass that on to future generations and say, hey, look what Farmville's accomplished and that World Heritage designation. And I've only been here for 6-7 months, and I feel that that's a really important thing for us to do.
Perfect. Well, if there are no other comments, then we will move to item 10, which is adjournment. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Perfect. It's been moved and second. We will consider this meeting adjourned. Thanks to all that have engaged with us online. We will see you in August.